Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that kind introduction. And dear friends and colleagues, it's a pleasure to join with you today for this very important conference. As some people will know, I'm personally involved and interested in this case against the arrested Iranian diplomat Assadi, because I'm one of those who's filed a complaint against the Iranian regime for its role in the terror plot as a third party in the court in Belgium. In September 2018, I took part in a press conference in London to warn about the surge in the Iranian regime's terrorist activities in Europe that I'm sure are being discussed before I spoke and will be discussed later today. At the conference that we had as long ago as September 2018, the NCRI UK Representative Office presented new details that showed that this wave of terror plots in Europe were decided at the very highest levels in Tehran, including the Supreme Leader Khamenei and the President Hassan Rouhani. Now, just remember, just before the bomb plot was foiled in Paris, Rouhani, who had a phone call to the French President Emmanuel Macron, they asked the president to limit the activities of Mrs. Mariam Rajavi and her resistance movement in France. The French president, who is not necessarily someone that I strongly support, rightfully refused this demand by Rouhani because Europe is based on the right to express freedom of speech and assembly. So the regime responded, as it always does and always will do when it doesn't get its way, by using terrorism. In July 2018, I and 5 other cross-party colleagues put forward an early day motion in the House of Commons, which was ultimately supported by 76 cross-party MPs. Our motion read, and I think this is worth repeating, that this House strongly condemns the attempted bombing at the gathering of the Iranian opposition in Paris. The Free Iran, the Alternative, strongly condemns Iran's regime over its terrorist activities in Europe and the misuse of diplomatic privileges, reiterates the need to try the suspects and expel other Iranian intelligence officers operating under diplomatic cover, or as ex-members of the opposition, calls for a robust policy to confront Iran's malign activities, and reiterates this incident, which demonstrates the regime's fear of the MEK and PMOI, and the National Council of Resistance of Iran coalition as the democratic alternative in its exile. So, as I listen to the other speakers today, I want to reiterate that many of the recommendations put forward today have very widespread support in the United Kingdom, in the House of Commons, and on a cross-party basis. We know that the regime is a very serious threat to all of our interests. We know that the regime has attacked our embassy in Tehran, it's engaged in cyber attacks against the UK Parliament, and now we have its diplomat who is about to be prosecuted for terrorism, threatening the court and European countries with even more terrorism if he's convicted for the terrorist charge. All of this goes to show the United Kingdom and our European allies must end the appeasement policy on Iran and abandon once and for all the long-held illusion that somehow moderates will emerge from within the theocratic dictatorship and usher much-needed reforms in Iran. We were told that Rouhani is such a man by the Foreign Affairs Committee of the United Kingdom House of Commons back in 2014, but that we must proceed with caution. Now, the reality is, it seems that the warnings were justified that as terrorism has increased and human rights situation in Iran has deteriorated under Rouhani's tenure. The time has now come for us to stand firm against this regime, join our American allies in pursuing the campaign of maximum pressure, and support the reimposition of all United Nations sanctions on the regime. We must also, as we've heard, join the US in prescribing the IRGC in its entirety as a terrorist organization. As the late great Sir Winston Churchill once said. An appeaser is one who feeds a crocodile, hoping that it let him last. Now the regime's terrorism has reached Europe and the time to act is now. The UK can now obviously act on its own following Brexit and support the reimposition of all United Nations sanctions and proscribe the IRGC. And I urge our UK government to do so. I hope the government will take the lead on a pressure campaign on the regime in Iran and lead the way for our European allies to follow. And in ending, I have joined 83 other colleagues in the House of Commons in writing to the Foreign Secretary, calling on him to end the policy of supplying arms to Iran, which is currently still going on. We must end the supply of arms to this terrorist regime. So thank you all for your participation in this conference today, and you have my unending support until such time as we've restored democracy to Iran and installed Maryam Rajavi and a democratic institution as the leaders of Iran. Thank you.